Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And today we're going to be talking about psychosocial development in late adulthood. We're always learning and growing, even when we get old. It's never too late to learn something new. There's a little poem here. There is still today and tomorrow fresh with dreams. Life never grows old. And that's by Rita Duskin from a haiku. So, yeah, we never are too old to be doing something. Although few adults have the resources and opportunities of an ex-president like Jimmy Carter, it is far from unique in using his retirement years productively. Because we can use our retirement years productively. We can do something, that we couldn't do before when we had to go to work every day. He is one of many older adults whose activism is creating a new view of life in old age. And I mean, that man was out there building houses when he was ancient. So, you're never too old to just do something. In the early 1980s, shortly after Carter left office, the writer Betty Friedan was asked to organize a seminar at Harvard University on growth and aging. The distinguished behaviorist B.F. Skinner declined to participate. Age and growth, he said, were a contradiction in terms. Skinner's also known for doing some bad stuff, so we won't get into that. Skinner was far from alone in that belief. Yet 2 decades later, late adulthood is increasingly recognized as a time of potential growth. Because when you were young, you were trying to establish yourself. You were trying to get a firm foundation under yourself. And then in middle age, you were probably, having a family, trying to keep that family going and get them raised. You were working, and so you had a little time for personal growth. But once you, are in a position where you don't have to have that daily grind, and you don't have to have those little people depending on you all the time, then you can take some time for yourself, and that's what, they did a survey a while back, and it was talking about, time for yourself, and a lot of people felt like they didn't have time for themselves now, but that they would have time for themselves later. They were sacrificing for their family, and for a lot of us, that's just what we have to do. So once you come into a late adulthood and you have some free time, it's a good time to work on your emotional and mental health, and work on yourself as a person, and grow and become the person that you always wanted to be, if you didn't get to be that coming up. Today, such terms as successful aging and optimal aging appear frequently in the theoretical and research literature, because successful aging means you don't just sit there and say, my life sucked, shit didn't happen the way I wanted it to, excuse my French, now my life's about over, and I'm just going to be miserable and sit here. And I know some folks like that. But successful aging means you turn that into the next part of your life. You get out, you have a life, you do things, and, you don't decide, well, my youth is over, so now I'm just done. Because if you do that, then you're going to have a rough end of life, because, if you physically don't do things, you're going to physically deteriorate. If you don't keep the old noodle running, it's going to fall apart. If you don't have a positive outlook, then you're going to have a negative outlook. So, it's a good time, to think about, successful aging. And optimal aging means get the most out of life, get the most out of your life. Don't just sit there, have a life, get a life, do things, keep yourself busy and happy, These terms are controversial because they seem to imply that there is a right or best way to age. And I disagree with that. I don't feel like that's what it implies. I feel like it means, people should have a happy later life. You shouldn't be sitting, being depressed, watching TV all the time, not do anything with your life and say, oh, I have no life and all this stuff. Excuse me. Because it's up to you. Your life is up to you. Your life is what you make it. If you make it, you feel like you're in jail sitting around being depressed all the time, then that's what it's going to be. Still, some older adults, like the Carters, do seem to get more out of life than others. And that's because they made the effort. And that's what you got to do. You got to make the effort. If your life is not what you want it to be, make an effort and turn it into what you want it to be. Growth in aging is possible. Of course it is. All of us can grow as people until your last day of life. You can learn a lesson. You can learn something on your last day of life. It's never too late until you take your last breath. It's like my first coaching client was a neighbor. She was 74 years old. And she had never talked about, stuff that happened, to her when she was growing up, because she was told never to talk about it. And I can relate some of that. I was told not to talk about, stuff that went on in our house, until I got in my late 30s. I'm like, you know what? I'm not keeping secrets anymore. I'm not doing it. So, a lot of people came against me for that, but I don't look at that as my problem. I look at that as the people whose secrets they wanted kept. That was their problem for wanting them kept to begin with. But anyway, she was telling me about her life and how horrible it was. I mean, her father was so seriously abusive, it wasn't even funny. But she had never told anyone. And she was my first life coaching client. And she needed that purge because she's been holding on to this for all of her life, And, she just thought I was great. And she thought it was the best thing ever, to help her. And we did some little exercises for her and things. And she's like, I'm so glad you were my neighbor. Because I never knew anyone could talk to me about this stuff. I never knew anyone who'd lived through the same stuff except for my brothers and sisters. And I couldn't talk to them about it because they were like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. So she said, I am so happy that you helped me out with this. So no matter how old you are, growth is possible. Don't give up. Don't quit. Don't bury your past because it never, it never stays buried, does it? It'll come back on you like a zombie. It's like I said, you got to take out that spiritual garbage that, is in there. You got to take it out. That emotional garbage, if you want to call it that, if some people object to the word spiritual. The emotional garbage, you got to take it out. Or it's going to sit in there, it's going to fester. And we all know what happens when garbage sits out in the open and festers. You look at that lid and things are crawling around, you're like, nope, no. But, if you don't take it out, that's how it's going to go. And many older adults who feel healthy, competent, and in control of their lives experience this last stage of life as a positive one. And I'm going to add to that and say in control of their emotions. Because, there are a lot of folks whose deal is spilling all out on everybody else. And that's not cool. I know some older folks who have never dealt with their issues, don't want to deal with their issues, and their issues are spilling out all over on everybody else. And we're just all like, oh my goodness sakes, why? We don't want this in our life. And, you should stay healthy. You should eat healthy. You should exercise. We all know what it takes to stay healthy. Competent. Again, if you use the noodle, it'll keep working. If you're not doing anything with it, it's going to deteriorate. So that's why I recommend to older folks, go take a free class at a college. Go study a language on, Duolingo or, Rosetta Stone, whatever you want to do. Keep yourself sharp. And again, your life is your life. No one should be living that for you. Even if you get to the point, like with my mother-in-law, where we've had to put her in assisted living because she can't walk, she keeps falling. The authorities told my son, who was, living with her, the time is over. We know she wants to stay in her home. We know y'all are trying to keep her wishes, but, she's become a nuisance to us. We have to come pick her up 3 and 4 times a week because when you're at work, no one's here to pick her up. So they said she can't live by herself anymore. She hates that, and every time, we've had to tell her this story. I don't know, like every time we see her. But, she has advancing dementia. You might have the same conversation with her 3 and 4 times a day. Like I said, she called my son 5 times in one day to remind him to bring something for her when he came. She just can't live by herself anymore. She can't physically or mentally do it anymore. So, in that situation, yeah, you might not be able to live the life you want to live. So my advice is, before you get to that point, live the life you want to live. Because you might get to that point someday. And you can't sit there in your chair in the dark and be depressed and look out the window and say, well, I never got to do this. I never got to do that. I want to do this and I want to do that. But it's like, okay, well, too late now. Live your life while you got it. While you can. And you can make the last stage of your life a positive one. Getting old don't have to be negative. Me and my husband, we're not letting it be negative. We're doing our thing. We're having a life. We look at theory and research on psychosocial development in late adulthood. Because again, you still are developing. You still have psychosocial, if you're doing anything, if you're allowing yourself to mentally and you're socializing develop, then even in late adulthood, you can be, growing as a person. We discussed such late life options as work. Some old people work. We had at our Kroger, this old man hunched over, could barely just move. It was just, you worried about him because he was a bagger. He bagged the groceries. And I mean, some of the bags with cans, he could barely, lift it up and put it in the cart. And sometimes my husband would just be like, I got that. And he, oh, thank you. But he was so old and frail, that you were afraid to even, that's like, oh gosh, it's him again. I'm afraid for him to even bag my groceries, poor old guy. But some people make that choice. They want to work. They want to go out and have a life. They don't want to sit home. Retirement happens for different folks. I retired because I couldn't go to work and drive home as well. I started having back spasms on the way home from work because, when I hold my foot down, it puts stress on my back muscles. So, and then I couldn't sit in a work chair and drive home both. It just didn't work. So I eventually was like, this can't keep happening. And then my mother had a heart attack. And she said, hey, I'm having problems getting dressed. I can't do my laundry for myself anymore and clean and stuff. Do you want to quit work and come help me? And so I did that. Excuse me. I only did that for a little while because after the first heart attack, 2 months later, we think she had another massive coronary and passed away. So that was really sad, because, my mother and I had got to be friends for the last 5 years, of her life. She was like my best friend. We talked all the time. We'd go out and have lunch, go shopping and stuff like that, because we found some things in common. Growing up, we didn't have the best relationship, but we found some things in common once we started talking, because there were some people kind of coming against me, and she's like, I want to know what the deal is. I want you to tell me the truth, the whole deal. And so I did. And she's like, well, you know what? You're not the only one that this has happened to. So, like I said, we bonded, over some pretty bad circumstances, but, we had a great relationship. But, she took her retirement early, and she went ahead and took her Social Security early because she said, I might not live to be, 65. And she made it past by a few months. So, you just never know. So if you're in a position where you can retire, if you can afford it, I say do it, for the simple fact that, you don't know how long you have. You need to live each and every day, and enjoy your life. If you have to wait for retirement, like my husband's decided he has to wait because he wants the maximum amount of money coming in. That's important to him. I just be happy with him here, but he wants that maximum amount of money coming in every month. So he wait until he can get his maximum amount of money before he retires. But it's hard on him. He's having back pain and hip pain. He had to have a growth removed from his shoulder not that long ago. So everyone's situation's different. You have to weigh that out and make the best decision for you. Living arrangements. Again, right now my father, he's 84, and he can live by himself. He can do everything for himself. We help him with groceries because he did have a little stumble coming up the steps. And he's kind of afraid of doing that again. So we go and get his groceries and bring them up the steps for him. But he puts them away. We put them in the kitchen for him, and he puts them away himself. The steps are the problem. That's why, me and my oldest son go over there once a week, and, we'll do laundry. If he needs laundry done, we do the laundry because he's got a bunch of steps to go down to get to the washer and dryer. So we do that for him. But otherwise, he can do anything he wants to do. He goes out in his car, goes and gets him some breakfast, goes to the bank and the drugstore and all that stuff. He does what he wants to do. So, he's having a pretty good, deal right now. Now, he did have a fall, and he got a little mad at some folks because they suggested he wasn't going to get to come back home. He was going to have to go somewhere. And he's like, I don't know why they thought that. I'm not a lazy bum that's not going to do my physical therapy. I'm going to go home. But he's already got a place picked out so that when he gets to that point, if he gets to that point, he already knows where he wants to go and, what he's going to do. And they have a little garage in case he wants to take his car and all that. So he said if he gets to the point where he's falling all the time or he's having problems just managing his daily life, he's going to already go somewhere because he doesn't want to be a burden, he says. So, it's good to have these plans in place, Everybody wants to stay home and live the rest of their life and die at home, but in reality, that's really not how it usually works out. Because if a person gets so physically disabled, and especially, your spouse, you're the same age usually around that age, so you're not going to be physically able to take care of them if you're about that same age and you're not healthy either. And mentally, if the person is just mentally not okay, like with severe dementia, and decides to wander off at a cousin like that, who just, and wander off. They catch him down the road, where you go? I'm going to mother. No, your other house has been gone. We sold that a long time ago. And, it's sad that we get to that point. But in reality, most of us do. Most of us are going to become so physically or mentally disabled in old age that we're going to probably have to be in assisted living. So, it's good to have plans. It's good to have plans. And, I'm not going to resent my kids. I've already told them. If I get to this point and this point, go ahead and check me in. Because I don't want to be a burden to y'all. I don't want to be in my house falling. Y'all have to worry about me. I don't want to be out of my mind, wandering around the neighborhood, neighbors bringing me home, or call and say, hey, we just saw your mom down at the store. She's in her house coat and nothing else. I don't want to be like that. So I've already said, hey, when the time comes, I'm not going to be mad about it. I'm going to make the best of it. If I'm that far out of my mind, I won't know I'm there anyway, probably. But, I'm going to make my little arts and crafts. I'm going to play bingo or whatever. I'm going to have a life. Don't worry about me. And their impact on society's ability to support an aging population, because our population is getting old. The boomers, the baby boomers, that's why it was called the baby boom. After World War II, everybody was just popping out people. So, they're all getting old now. So we have a lot more older people, and the younger generation is not having kids like, that boomer generation did. So, out of my sons, they don't have any children yet. My middle son has a step, child. If they end up getting married, they're engaged now, or, well, not really engaged, but they're living together. And a lot of their friends don't have kids either. So we're in a decreased population boom right now, where the Gen Y and millennial folks are not having kids at the rate that the boomers and even Gen X did. So we're heading towards a negative population in the future. And to care for the frail and infirm. Again, if we live long enough, we're going to become frail and infirm. So, that's my dad said. He just wants to drop dead one day. He don't want to get all frail and infirm. He don't want to be like that. But again, that's not our choice. So, I'm already disabled, so I have a suspicion that as I advance in age, get a lot older, into the 70s, 80s, 90s, or more, if you live to be more, the years of a man are 120, and that's why I joke with my husband. I say, it says in the Bible, years of a man are 120, so until God tells me different, I'm going to be here. And someday he might tell me different. So, we might have to think about that. That someday we might become frail and infirm. What do we want to happen? What are our wishes? So, finally, we look at relationships with families and friends. And your relationship with your family is important, because a lot of times that's your support system. You have a family. Families become estranged for whatever reason. And your extended family might not be there for you. But for the most part, your spouse, your children are going to be there for you. That's your people. That's who you love, and they love you, and they're just going to be there for you. And now friends, if you have friends, that's a good thing, because that's someone to talk to, someone to visit with, someone to, discuss your problems with, because that's what good friends do for each other, I joke about, frenemies, but I really don't have that many frenemies, and I joke sometimes about one person that I was friends with, and said, with friends like that, who needs enemies, that I was saying. But, friends, are good to have. Friends are someone you can talk to and relate to. And, like one of my friends, we've been having big storms where I live, and a tree fell and hit her car. And so, another person needs some assistance. And so I've been praying for people. And that's what friends do for you too. They pray for you, and say, hey, help them with whatever it is they need, which greatly affects the quality of these last years, because that's what you want. You want quality last years. You don't want to have a crappy end to life. And so many people do, because they have such a negative outlook. They're just like, well, I'm done now. I'm over now. I'm just sitting here waiting to die. It's like, why? If that's what you want to do, if that would make you happy, I'm not going to say anything against it. But I'm going to enjoy my life. As for me, I'm going to enjoy my life. I'm not going to sit and do nothing. I can't do it. I'm a little bit hyper. I don't have attention deficit. In fact, if I was paying attention, I remember it. I have a great memory when we used to play Trivial Pursuit. Me and my father and my uncle used to sweep the board with everybody else around us. But, I'm not going to sit there. I'm going to do things, because I can't just sit and do nothing. That bothers me. Like, there are people who sit and watch TV all day, and it's like, I couldn't do it. I could not do it. I'll go out of my gourd, bored to death, if I had to sit and watch TV all day. Now, if I'm sick, I'll lay there in the bed and watch TV. In the evening, I like to take a few hours, family time. We start at 8 o'clock, family time, sit there and watch TV or a movie together. And on Saturday night, we have movie night where, we have pizza and we watch a movie or two or three sometimes till about 1 in the morning together, But otherwise, every day I have something that I'm doing. Like I'm doing this because I said I wanted to teach through my 50s. So I'm 57 going on 58 this August. So I'm still teaching because I want to be of service to folks and I want to help folks. Because I know when I needed help, it wasn't immediately available. And I had to search for the help. I went through 3 therapists before I found one that clicked. And I was in 2 support groups, when I was in my 20s. So, I know that there are folks out there who feel alone, who feel like, they might be crazy, so they don't want to talk to anybody, and they're afraid they're going to get put in an institution. And I can tell you, 90 some odd, 93% of the time, that does not happen. Usually talk therapy, med management, you're fine. That's why I tell people, don't be ashamed to go to therapy. You talk to them, that's what they're there for. That's what they're there for, to help you figure out your mind. And it's you. They're not going to tell you, things, to put things in your mind or whatever. It's to help you. It's to guide you to figure out your own mind and your own emotions and things. And it's a great tool. Because most of us, I say, as soon as you turn 18, you should start going to therapy to get the baggage unpacked that your birth family put on you. Because there almost inevitably is some. Because nobody's perfect. No person had the perfect childhood. So, sometimes you just got to unpack that baggage. And, if you have problems and you especially went through abuse, support groups are great. Because I know when I went to a support group for the first time, I was scared to death. When my therapist said, let's put you in a support group. You need to be, and I'm like, oh God, no. No, I don't want to be around other people and have time. No. Because I felt very lonely. I felt like I was the only one who, had been through such horrible things, And then I got into the support group and I heard some of these other people's stories and I was like, holy, there were much more horrible stories than mine. And then it was like kind of a relief. And I know that's terrible to say about hearing somebody else's horrible story, but I realized mine wasn't the worst one out there. So I think that was great, and very brave of these people to come and do it. And I guess of me too, I was told. So that you can help others, live through what you lived through. So, when you get to the elder stage of life, if you haven't got your stuff sorted out, a lot of times that's when it starts coming back to haunt you. Because you haven't sorted it out. And now your brain's like, okay. And this is a thing about, people with repression who have repressed memories, repressed, things that they did. And one day, your brain's like, okay, we're good now. So here, I'm going to bring this up for you to deal with. We didn't have the mental and emotional capacity to deal with it earlier, but now we do. So we're going to bring this up for you to deal with now. And then one day you're just going about businesses and, suddenly you remember and you're like, oh my God, how did I even forget that? So in late adulthood is a good time to get your stuff sorted out, because if you don't, it's going to come out and it's going to haunt you, and it's going to affect your relationships and your life in general. And it's like someone I know who's in a home. She got to the point where people just didn't want to go see her anymore because she was such drama, and complaining and ungrateful. That people were coming to see her, ungrateful that people were bringing her stuff, always more, not good enough. So that everybody's just like, I don't even want to go. So, that's not how we want to end up. We don't want to end up where people don't even want to talk to us, don't even want to deal with us, because, we're so negative, and haven't got our stuff sorted out, so that we're putting all that on other folks, So that's not how you want to end up. So, in late adulthood, if you haven't dealt with your garbage, you haven't taken it out, that is a good time to do that, so that as you age and get into old age, you don't become a crotchety old person that you're taking your stuff out on everybody else around you, and everybody's just like, yeah, no, we don't want to deal with this, here, go in the home. But because that happens, that can happen, at home that I visited, there was this lady, and she said, my family never speaks to me. They see me once a year, only on Christmas. They don't come see me at any other time. But now this woman was known to be a very stern, there's not a nice word, but, she was that kind of a person where, no matter what you thought, she was right 100%, and there was no wiggle room for anyone else to have any opinions or knowledge, even if she didn't even know about a thing, you couldn't know more than her. So, based on that, I'm like, well, there's a reason, honey, that nobody's coming to see you. But, at that point, you can't say that to them because, especially if they're not mentally able to handle it. So, again, in late adulthood, if you haven't dealt with your stuff and you got stuff, and let's face it, we all got stuff, it's time to take out the garbage before it festers and becomes a problem in your old age. Because, we don't want to be a burden, and we don't want to be such a, again, there's no nice word for being a bewitch or a jerk or whatever, but we don't want to be that, so that the folks around us don't want to deal with us anymore. That's the nicest way I could put that. That's our let's talk about psychosocial development in late adulthood, because it's never too late until the day it is too late. We're growing and learning until that last breath. So that's where I'm gonna leave you for today. Hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Until next time.